My stepfather and mother are going on a honeymoon with their daughters, leaving me alone, so I am making sure they don't come back into my house. I am 23 years old and the legal owner of the home I grew up in. I inherited this house from my mother when she passed away last year at the age of 48 due to a heart attack. It was sudden, but I have now found peace with it. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old and had shared custody of me, so I spent half of the month with my dad and the other half with my mom. I must say I was closer to my mom because she understood me, while my dad, who is 51 years old, was always a bit too busy for me. I felt like I never had his full attention because work and relationships were more important to him. I don't think he treated me as a priority, but I was okay with that as long as I had my mom. A few years ago, just after I turned 19 and started college, my dad decided to move to San Antonio for work, so we started seeing each other less and only met around the holidays. 2 years ago, he brought his girlfriend at the time, Lisa, who is 39 years old, to celebrate Christmas with us. She also brought her 2 daughters, aged 19 and 17, from her previous relationship with her high school boyfriend. They had never married but had split up about 6 years before she started dating my dad. That was a surprise for us, because my dad had never brought any girlfriend to family dinners, but we gave Lisa and her daughters the warmest welcome we could and did our best to make them feel comfortable with us. It was a very pleasant evening, and I would say we all got along very well. Even after that, whenever I talked to my dad on the phone, Lisa would also greet me, and she was very sweet to me. Her daughters were a bit shy and introverted, so they mostly kept to themselves, but overall, we had a good relationship. After my mom passed away, I found out that she left me the house. Fortunately, for some reason, my mom divided all her assets in her will around my 19th birthday because she always liked to plan ahead, even in morbid situations like these. Anyway, since I had just graduated, I decided to move in and find a job that wouldn't force me to move soon. I wanted to spend the next few years in my childhood home simply because it was my place of comfort. My dad wasn't very happy with my mom's decision and made sure I knew it after he found out about the will. He and Lisa had been very sweet and supportive at the time of the funeral, but my dad was a bit gloomy when he realized he wasn't going to get the house back. This house was the one my parents bought together when they first got married, but my mom took it over during the divorce. It was a fair deal because he got away without paying alimony, even though my mom had given up her career to stay home and raise me so my dad could focus on his work. I think keeping the house in the settlement and letting my dad go without alimony was completely fair. She recovered afterward with some help from her parents and even made sure I never felt neglected or unimportant. She did both jobs well, and I didn't mind that my dad was upset about not getting the house back. He didn't talk about it much, but I could tell by his behavior that he wasn't happy about it. At that time, I didn't care because I was still mourning my mom, and my dad being upset about her will was the least of my worries. She left him all her wedding jewelry and all the gifts he had given her, so that should have been enough for him. He went back to San Antonio with Lisa a few weeks after the funeral, and since then, I've been living here on my own. However, about 6 months ago, my dad told me he was now engaged to Lisa and wanted to get married where his home was. So he was going to come back here during the weeks leading up to the wedding because it didn't make sense to stay in a hotel when there was a house with enough spare rooms. Her daughters were also homeschooled, so they wouldn't have any issues with schools. I agreed with him, so I let them all move into my house and stay with me before the wedding for a couple of reasons. I was tired of living alone and I got along well with Lisa, so I didn't think there was anything wrong with letting them live with me. Plus, my dad also promised to share all the bills with me while they lived here, which meant I didn't have to worry about overspending on that either. So they moved in with me about a month ago and have been here since then. It was nice to have them here, and I felt much less lonely than I used to when I lived alone. I thought I could get used to this. I even dreaded the day when they would all leave and go back to their normal lives because that would mean I would have to go back to my normal life alone, too. But then, 2 weeks ago, 3 days before the wedding, my dad sat me down and asked if I would be willing to let them all live here permanently. I didn't expect it at all, but he explained that he had come back here to make me feel a little more comfortable with the idea of being part of a family and living with him since he didn't like the idea of me living alone in this house. He planned to gradually introduce me to this, and now that he thought I was getting along, he wanted to know if I would be willing to make this a permanent arrangement. I wanted to say yes right away, but his behavior when he found out he wasn't going to get the house back puzzled me a bit. As much as I would have loved to make it a permanent arrangement, I didn't think it was a good idea to do it so soon, and I didn't want to make the mistake of acting on my emotions. I knew this was the only logical solution to my overwhelming feelings of loneliness, but that didn't mean I had to let them all move in with me. It had only been a month since they had been living here, so as much as I wanted to say yes, I ended up telling him I needed some time to think. It was a gut feeling, but I just knew for some reason that it would be best for me to give it some time and not make a hasty decision. I set aside my personal feelings and told him that I would inform him of my decision after the wedding. He seemed upset but didn't push the issue. 10 days ago, they finally got married, and we had a great time at the wedding. They were supposed to stay here for a couple more days after the wedding and then return home, so I was preparing to inform them of my decision, which was like this. But before I could do so, they all left for their honeymoon without even telling me. 2 days after their wedding, I woke up completely alone, and everyone had gone. Many of their belongings were still at my house, so I decided to make some calls, but no one answered for quite some time, and I continued to worry about it. I had planned to tell them about my decision that very day, but I couldn't even get in touch with them for hours. Finally, around noon, Lisa answered and casually informed me that they had all gone on their honeymoon and wouldn't be back for a week. I was stunned because I obviously expected that they would at least inform me of their plans before just leaving, even if I wasn't included. I felt offended that they didn't ask me, but I didn't want to be petty, so I started by asking why no one had informed me about any of this. She gave me a poor excuse, saying they had forgotten to tell me, but she told me not to worry because they would be back soon. I tried to explain that wasn't the point at all and that my issue was that they simply left without a word or even a goodbye, and that was rude of them. I said I wanted to talk to my dad, but that's when her tone changed, and she said my dad was busy and didn't have time to talk to me. I still tried to stay calm and told her to let me know when he had time so that I could get in touch with him directly. I said it politely, but she turned on me and suddenly went from being sweet to being a really biting and cruel stepmother. She told me that my dad was going to be busy for the next few days and asked me not to bother them. She went on to say that there was no need to act so hysterically just because they had left me behind, and she felt the need to remind me that I was no longer a child. My dad now had a new family, so I needed to accept that, and by the time they got home, she wanted me to stop worrying about myself and clean the house for them. Now, I don't know who she thought she was talking to, but she certainly wasn't going to talk to me like that. She hung up right after saying that, and my anger was literally through the roof. I decided not to call my dad after that and thanked the universe for not letting me accept his suggestion before I had seen this side of his new wife. There was no way in hell they were going to live with me, so I personally packed all of their belongings as carelessly and badly as I could, stuffed them into a couple of cardboard boxes, and left them in the yard for them to find when they decided to return. I didn't care what would happen to those things because they didn't belong to me, and they didn't belong inside a house that was mine either. After that, I went on with my life as usual and tried not to think about the betrayal I felt because of what my dad had done for no real reason. Yesterday, they finally returned from their honeymoon, and luckily, I was at work when they found all of their stuff in the yard. I had also changed the door locks in the meantime so they couldn't get in either. My dad was extremely angry when he contacted me about it. He told me I was being a spoiled child and that I was overreacting because to them, leaving me at home without notice wasn't something worth getting angry about and they hadn't done anything wrong. I simply told him to take his boxes and leave, and if I saw them on my property when I got home, I would call the police. He insulted me and then hung up,